Hello all you wargame loving cosmonauts, as always I am Cosmic and today we're going to be reviewing Steel Division Normandy 44, which is the new tactical real-time strategy game brought to you by Eugen Systems and published by Paradox Interactive. Eugen Systems are of course the developer behind the critically acclaimed Wargame and Ruse series, and it's a game that is pretty much I would say, spiritual successor to Wargame in some senses. It's a game that has taken what came before in terms of the Wargame series and built upon it with the aesthetic and of course setting of World War II Normandy. So Steel Division Normandy 44 has a single player campaign and it has a multiplayer, and the multiplayer itself is probably where the majority of the replayability and longevity come in. The multiplayer is where I want to start really because I feel that it is most expansive. It is a multiplayer with various game modes including a 10v10 team deathmatch mode, which I think is fantastic. The game itself, in terms of its core mechanics, works very well. Like I said, any player who has played the Wargame series will pretty much come to grips with Steel Division's mechanics very early on. Before entering a match, you select your battalion, whether it's the infantry division, whether it's a tank corps, whatever you want to play as, then you select that. Then you have to build a unit roster, and you're only able to have a certain number of each type of unit. So you have infantry units, you have tank units, you have anti-air units, you have air units, you have artillery units, and so on and so forth. Each of those units costs a set number of points, and the way that the game works is once you enter the game, each basically phase you will accumulate points, and you're able to spend those points to bring in reinforcements as the match plays out. Now, game length wise, that is going to, pretty much run you anywhere between 30 to an hour per individual match, depending on single player and multiplayer. And as the game progresses, you're able to reinforce your front line. Now, the way any given battle works is a very straightforward, simple blend between Wargame and something like Hearts of Iron, whereby the front line of any given battle has a ever-changing visual front line change. So there's going to be a red team and a blue team, and as you push forward and capture territory, that front line is going to change, and it's combined with a fog of war mechanic, so you can't see the enemy's position, only you can see within a line of sight of a unit. There's a morale system in place so that units can get pinned down under heavy fire, and if they get too much fire they will fall back. And it's a system that, for the most part, in its terms of its basics, works well. All of the mechanics in combat complement each other. It's about countering and anti-counters. So you're going to have infantry, and they can be pretty much stomped with a tank. So you're going to have to either get an anti-tank infantry unit or an anti-tank vehicle to deal with that tank, and vice versa. And it's about basically playing the role of finding out what given unit is going to be required for a situation, and then reinforcing your front line depending on what is needed and where. One of the game's biggest assets is the actual maps themselves. They are used from reconnaissance photos of actual locations in Normandy in 1944, and they are pretty faithfully recreated. You can use terrain and the maps to your advantage, so you can hide infantry units in heavily foliage areas and trees. You can hold buildings with infantry units. You can destroy buildings with heavy artillery and tanks. And the map itself and the environments are ever changing, and it's something that really benefits it. Also, the fact that you can zoom right in to see the action. The game looks visually fantastic. It sounds really, the audio side of things works really, really well. It's really authentic, and it gives you a really grand sense of this is a giant battle, particularly in multiplayer, particularly the 10v10 modes. That's just something that's just really fun chaos. You'll each have an infantry unit, an infantry division or a tank division, and then you're focusing on objectives, using teamwork and trying to overcome the enemy. And it's something that is a pretty heavy time investment but it's something that works really well to its advantage, and fans of the genre, fans of the wargame series will really come to appreciate. Now, all that isn't to say that there are no problems with this game, because there certainly is, including the mechanics themselves can be pretty much exploited in multiplayer as it currently stands, particularly the morale system, particularly the way that units are currently balanced. It allows for basically two meta ways to play the game, which is go heavy on air or go heavy on artillery or go both, because you can end up having really underpowered anti-air units, which means that if your opponent is really going to be focusing on aircraft and you've just basically tried to go with a hybrid of having infantry, tanks and anti-aircraft and maybe a little bit of air support, they're going to steamroll you, like just flat out. Air units are really overpowered, anti-air units are really underpowered. You can pretty much guarantee that if your opponent has maybe 3 or more aircraft, and doesn't matter what AA you have, you can pretty much wipe that AA out with those aircraft. The same goes for artillery. Artillery is really devastating in this game as it currently stands balance-wise. I mean, you can just field a bunch of artillery units really early on in the game and pretty much pin down the enemy for a good amount of time period. I mean, you're talking because of the way the morale system works, and I think that the morale system needs tweaking because it's a bit too generous. It means that you can fire an artillery shell within the general vicinity of an infantry unit, and then that infantry unit is instantly pinned down and will pretty much be guaranteed to fall back within the next minute or so. Add to that the fact that you can have multiple artillery units at any one time, then you just have a sea of artillery fire which will pin down pretty much any large surface area of any given map, pretty much stopping the enemy advance in their tracks. Which means that when that comes to multiplayer and those exploits come to multiplayer, what you find is, once you've got to grips with the game, there's 2 ways to play in multiplayer. You go heavy on air, or you go heavy on artillery, or you just go artillery and air, and that's all you focus on. And that's pretty much the only way to win, because if you don't go that route, you can be guaranteed that the other player will be going that route, and you will suffer the consequences. I was also disappointed with the single player. I think the single player is good for learning the mechanics of the game for new players. The narrative and the voice acting was a little bit disappointing. I wasn't particularly happy with the writing. I didn't think there was a strong narrative within that single player at all, and it was just something that was a little bit of a letdown. It is a great way to learn the game. It's a great way to practice. The AI is pretty damn tough as well, so like I said, it is a good way to practice. But if you're looking for a really story-driven, narratively heavy game, then this is not it. And ultimately, where the real joy comes from Steel Division Normandy 44 is within the multiplayer itself. The multiplayer is just fantastic, and what you end up having with Steel Division is a game that mechanically at its core has all the right elements for a really fantastic RTS/war game. Yes, it does need improvements. Yes, it does need a lot of balance changes and a lot of fixes, but I think in a couple of weeks, in a month or 2, it is going to be an absolutely outstanding experience from start to finish. And I think that if they just hone that balancing, especially for the multiplayer, make sure that you can't power game the crap out of it with artillery and aircraft, then I think what you're going to end up having is a game that will be around for quite some time. In terms of my recommendation, I think for $40, it's a really solid investment. Yes, it may not be perfect now, but with a couple of balance changes, a couple of patches, what you're going to end up with is a really solid multiplayer to really get your teeth into. I think for the time being, $40 to play the single player, to get a taste of the multiplayer, there's plenty of game to get into here. I think for strategy fans, for RTS fans, it's well worth the $40 investment. Otherwise, if you're not sure about the balance issues and you would rather wait, certainly worth waiting for a sale, or at least waiting for a couple of months until those balance changes have occurred. For me, I absolutely loved it, and I think that it is just an absolutely top game and I was really impressed with the quality throughout. Yes, it's got problems, but what game doesn't? And that is my review of Steel Division Normandy 44. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, make sure to subscribe and share the video on social media. And as always, I will see you next time.